Hello, and welcome to the first of two workshops presented by the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub at the University of Minnesota, Inclusive Engagement, Partnering with the Disability Community. This workshop is titled Reaching Out to Disability Community. We've designed these workshops to be asynchronous, which means that it is self-guided and you can proceed at your own pace. You can also use these videos and resources for individual learning, use them with your staff, or in a classroom with your students. We have a suggested agenda and pacing that you can follow if that's helpful, but please adjust to suit your needs. Shun and I introduced ourselves in the introductory video, which we recommend watching, but just quickly, and to also model some of the access practices that we hope you'll begin to implement, we're going to introduce ourselves with short visual descriptions. My name is Jessica Cooley. I use she, her pronouns. I am a lushly enfleshed, proudly fat white woman with brown hair, and I'm wearing a black shirt. And I am currently the guest curator at the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub and have nearly 2 decades of experience as a curator and scholar of disability art.
Hello, my name is Jun and I use she, her pronouns. I am a Chinese woman with black hair and wearing a light blue shirt. And I'm currently the graduate research assistant in the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub.
So another access practice that we advocate for is to visually describe whatever images and text are presented. So on this opening slide, there is an image of multicolored sticky notes from the community art project created during the opening night celebration for the community curated exhibition that was called The Art of Disability Justice Now, that was co-curated with myself, members of the community organization Amplify Minnesota, and students in my graduate seminar. In response to the question, what does disability justice mean to you? Community members' responses include equity for all, collective care, ask, don't assume. The text on the slide reads inclusive engagement, partnering with the disability community, part 1, reaching out to disability community. And there is a text box with an arrow pointing to the images of sticky notes that reads community responses to the question, what does disability justice mean to you? A brief overview of what we'll do today. I will discuss, and Shun will discuss, best practices for reaching out to potential partners in the disability community and address common access barriers. And Shun will also lead us in a few exercises for thinking about how to do that work. So we won't be able to cover everything in this workshop. There's lots of ways you can implement best practices. And what we'd suggest is that you check out the resource folder we've put together that links out to a lot of additional content and other information. So I have gone on to the next slide, and we want to begin with one of the most important access practices we hope you'll use in any of your meetings, which is to do what's called an access check. An access check is a proactive practice used to identify and address barriers to participation, ensuring that spaces, events, or communications are accessible and inclusive for all individuals, but particularly those with disabilities. So a visual description of this slide, there is a QR code that will take you to the slide deck for this workshop. And the text on the slide includes some access information that you might want to implement. The text reads, introductions and access check, audiovisual access. Let us know at any time if our volume is too low or if the closed captions are not working. We will describe most images in the presentation. Listen to your body mind. There will be a 10-minute break. We've also included the written out link to the slide deck. And then we ask, what else can we do to create access for you? Access checks really depend on what kind of meeting you're running, But as an example, we'd like to offer this one from the amazing disability scholar and community organizer, Angela Carter.
Photo of Annie Sagaria, who is an LGBT Latinx disability activist. And Annie is a wheelchair user, and they are wearing a rag leather jacket and sunglasses, and the text reads, "The future is accessible." We do access checks as a way of reminding ourselves that we're whole human beings that bring the complexities of our body-mind experiences into every environment that we engage in. And it's a way to make sure that we disrupt notions of ability that often come with us into our workplace and learning places. So a few access things that we want to be sure and cover before we dive into the content of our talk today. We want to invite you all to chat the hosts. If you have any audio or visual issues that come up during our presentation, you're also welcome to chat the hosts or the panelists if you have any questions that come up during the conversation. And we'd love for you to use the Q&A feature to submit questions about the content. At the end of our presentation, we'll answer and respond to as many of those as we possibly can. I will also name as my own access measure that I can sometimes struggle to track the chat while presenting. So I likely won't respond to your messages if you do chat the panelists, but I am certain that my colleagues will help you. And a few other preventative access measures that we have taken is that we have included slide numbers on all of the slides. We've worked to be sure there's a color contrast on the slides, and Khaled already provided the link for you if you'd like to pull up the slide deck on your own screen. We will read all the text out loud and describe any images that are relevant to the content and not just decorative. There should be auto captions or captioning available for you on the Zoom, using the Zoom feature down on the bottom of your screen or on your device. If you'd like to use the transcripts or the subtitles, whatever works best for you. And of course, Katie and I want to encourage you to engage in your physical space and in our digital space in whatever way best supports your participation today. It's a webinar, so we can't even see your little Zoom boxes, but we know you're there, and we want you to take care of yourselves, stand up, stretch, eat, stem, do yoga, knit, be your full self as we engage in this conversation this afternoon.
So Angela offered a really wonderful access check that I want to note also spends time inviting people to participate as their whole selves. And we also want to invite you to move through these workshops as your whole self. That means that you should pause the workshop to eat if you're hungry, or to take a walk, or if you want to listen to this workshop while you're knitting or lying down. We want to invite you to do whatever brings you comfort and creates the most access for you. I moved on to the next slide, where we have the suggested agenda for this workshop. It's designed to be 90 minutes, and there are multiple points in the workshop where we will ask you to break off into small groups or to do individual reflections. At these points, we will ask you to simply pause the video and come back when you are ready. We also are including the agenda slide because it models another form of access that you might want to implement in your work, which is to give people a sense of what to expect, and also to know that there will be breaks. So we have a break set up, but we recommend having a break at least every 45 minutes and at least once an hour. However, this might also be a specific access need that a participant informs you of, where they will need perhaps more frequent breaks or longer breaks. The best practice is to listen to that participant and implement their request for break frequency and length. So I've moved on to the next slide, and on the screen is that same image of the queer disability activist Annie Sagara that Angela offered a visual description of in her access check. And the text reads, "Best practices for partnering with the disability community." And we actually still have an old timestamp on this, but it says from 10:10 to 10:30. So, but what we're doing is really for the next 20 to 30 minutes, we'll be offering suggestions for best practices specifically for reaching out to disability community. It will include some of the access practices that we've just discussed and additional suggestions to ensure reciprocal and ethical engagement. So I've moved on to the next slide that reads, reaching out to disability communities, centering access, consultation, flexibility, communication, design with your partners. So centering access is a critical part of any engagement with the disability community. Best practice is creating access specific to the people and community that you are working with. So the first step is consultation. That is to ask what people need. And because people's access needs change, the consultation stage around this, or the kind of checking in on what people's needs are, is not just something that's done at the beginning, but that is done continuously throughout the process during the planning and implementation stages. Flexibility is also a key part of creating access. So be prepared to adapt and adjust plans as needed to accommodate individual needs and preferences. And recognize that access needs, again, it may vary and change over time. In order to engage the disability community, your initial communications should attend to different communication needs, meaning that you will want to offer different modes of communication. So, for example, someone who is blind may be more comfortable communicating over the phone, and someone who is deaf may prefer email correspondence. So offering multiple options for contact, for example, email, phone, in-person, or video call is really important. We want to design with your partners. And this is an essential part of disability engagement that also echoes the disability activist call, nothing about us without us. The ableist history of disability engagement is one where able-bodied people have made decisions for disabled people without consulting disabled people, and certainly without allowing disabled people to indeed make decisions for themselves about what is best for them. And so while some people point to universal design as the gold standard for creating access, we really advocate for creating access based on what disabled people communicate to you about their needs. Just some background, the idea and concept of universal design, which is a good one and a lofty goal, really comes out of late 20th century design philosophy, advocating for building spaces that are accessible for everyone, disabled and non-disabled users. However, in the last 20 years, scholars and community activists have reconsidered the effectiveness of this broad appeal to design for all, without considering the pitfalls of the, who the all is or who the universal person typically is. As disability scholar Amy Hemry explains, and this is from Amy's book, Building Access, quote, promises of universal design for everyone materialized in relation to particular types of users, and whether I or anyone else was part of that everyone depended on whether our presence had been anticipated, in what ways and for what purposes, close quote. In other words, universal design in its generalization of all people prioritizes those we already presume to know. So current best practices dictate that while we still implement broad and basic access measures, including providing wheelchair access and things like having closed captions on during online meetings, we also create avenues for individuals to communicate their specific needs. These avenues can be developed in a variety of different ways, but no matter the avenue, the goal is the same: to ask people what it is they need in order to fully participate. This may come in the form of an individual email, or it could be a Google form that asks for feedback. related to a person or community's access needs. And it should really address some large key topics: physical access, communication and language, technology needs, dietary needs, sensory needs. And then there should always be a section for other needs that may not fall into those larger groups. And this could include things like pregnancy or cultural and religious access needs. So creating accessible events and meetings takes time, and you will want to inquire about and start planning for access needs as soon as possible. In the resource folder, you will find email templates, and Shun will talk about this a little bit later as well, that you can use as examples of how to begin engaging with the disability community. We will also go into this in a little more detail in the second workshop. So I've moved on to the next slide, and it reads, quote, reaching out to disability communities, compensation, fair compensation, transparency, equity, consider disability benefit limits. So another essential part of creating reciprocal and ethical engagement with the disability community is to compensate people for their time and expertise, which means offering fair compensation that recognizes the value of time, expertise, and lived experience of disabled people. Best practices say that we not just compensate people for the product or deliverable that they might offer, but that they are compensated for all aspects of the collaboration, including consultations, email responses, advisory roles, workshops, presentations, or really any form of engagement where the university partners are asking for the disability community's time or expertise. You will also want to be transparent about compensation structures and payment processes. Clearly communicate expectations and timelines for payment. For example, we know at the U that sometimes payment can take significant time to process, and it's important that you are transparent about this length of time upfront. Equitable compensation for all contributors, regardless of their level of perceived expertise or position, is key, because ableist barriers that keep disabled people out of higher education, or because of ableist barriers that keep disabled people out of higher education, you may be working with people who do not have a formal education. However, you should still compensate them at the highest level. One of the most important points to keep in mind is regarding disability benefit limits. Some community members may receive state disability benefits, which often have limits on how much they can earn without affecting their eligibility or benefit amount. Exceeding this limit could inadvertently reduce or eliminate their benefits. At the University of Minnesota, for example, individuals can currently, as of 2025, be paid up to $599 without requiring tax reporting forms. However, if the compensation exceeds $600 and your collaborator has disability benefits, explore alternative options for compensation. We know that at the U, there are very specific regulations for how to go about doing this. And so you will most definitely want to consult with your financial manager to make sure you are complying with the regulations of your particular department or unit on campus. If you happen to be working with the Liberal Arts Engagement Hub on a project, please get in touch with the staff about this matter. However, if you happen to be working at another institution outside the U, you may have more flexibility for alternative funding, including the ability to perhaps purchase needed items like art supplies on an individual or community's behalf, offering non-monetary compensation like transportation assistance, or offering in-kind donations like a free museum membership or tickets to an event. It's crucial to ensure any compensation method does not negatively impact the individual's benefits. Therefore, it's important to consult with the individual to understand their benefits and what is and is not allowable. And it's really important to consult with your financial manager to make sure you are complying with the regulations of your particular department or unit on campus. So I've moved on to the next slide, and the text reads, reaching out to disability communities, understanding time and effort, relationship building, capacity, sustainability. Relationship building is a complex and ongoing process, but critical to any community partnership between the university and the community based on mutual respect and collaboration, which is in the process of building trust and rapport with disability communities. The writer Adrienne Marie Brown writes that, quote, "We move at the speed of trust," close quote, which means that in order to honor the capacity and expertise of the disability community, we often move slowly when it comes to relationship building. It's important to note that people with disabilities may have limited capacity for a wide variety of reasons, including that the disability itself, perhaps the extra time that disabled people spend every day managing their disability, which can include things like extra doctor visits, extra time on the phone, negotiating insurance. The disability community often conveys the flexibility needed around capacity in two ways, what's called CRIP time and spoon theory. So CRIP time is a concept that highlights the unique relationship disabled people have with time. It acknowledges the ways that disability and chronic illness disrupt conventional schedules and expectations, requiring flexibility and accommodation. CRIP time challenges the rigid structures of normal time and advocates for a more inclusive understanding of how people experience and move through the world. And if you want to read more about this, we've included Ellen Samuels's essay, 6 Ways of Looking at CRIP Time, in our resource folder. The other way that disabled folks sometimes talk about this is through what's called spoon theory. And spoon theory is a metaphor used to describe the amount of physical and or mental energy a person has available for daily activities and tasks. It was introduced in 2003 in an essay where Christine Miserandino explains to a friend what it was like to live with lupus. And we've also linked to this essay in our resource folder. But in spoon theory, there's a set of spoons one has every day. And so each spoon represents a unit of energy. People with chronic illnesses or disabilities often have a limited number of spoons to spend each day. And even what some people might consider simple tasks can use up multiple spoons. People with chronic illness must constantly manage their energy levels to avoid flare-ups and burnout. Spoon theory is a handy way of letting someone know your energy level. So you may hear something like, "I'm out of spoons today," which means I don't have any more energy, I'm at capacity, we'll have to stop and do this another day. So of course, in order to do any of this work, it's important to create a sustainable project itself, and then create sustainable long-term impact relationships. This also means that you yourself may want to consider your capacities and what you need to do this work. So for us, sustainable projects and relationships often hinge on collaboration, which means that you'll want to have a team of people who have clearly defined goals for doing this work. And this idea of collaboration is actually a key principle from the disability justice movement, what you might also call interdependence. In other words, we are better and more sustainable when we rely on each other. And frankly, it's a lot more fun to work with other people than it is to just do all this work on your own. So we'll talk more about this in the next workshop, but there are also some other resources at the U that you can rely on to do this work. So that you are not alone in this process. So I've moved on to the next slide, and it reads, reaching out to disability communities, supportive and sustainable engagement, listen and learn, empowerment, collaboration, and accountability. So we kind of just talked about a few of these things in the previous slide, but we'll sort of reiterate it because it is so important. But so supportive and sustainable engagement is part of creating access. And some helpful ideas to keep in mind are actively listening to the perspectives and experiences of disabled people and being open to feedback and willingness and having a willingness to learn from mistakes. We want to create an empowering environment, which we could talk about in a lot of different ways, but we want to emphasize two here. And the first is to create a non-hierarchical decision-making environment where all people have an equal say and vote. We recommend what's called a 0 to 5 voting practice that you can learn more about in the resource folder. And then the second point about empowerment is that empowerment also means supporting the self-determination and agency of disabled people. So avoiding paternalistic or patronizing attitudes, to avoid ableist language and colloquialisms. And for some specific examples and guidelines, we'd like to point you to Lydia XZ Brown's glossary of ableist phrases that is also linked in the resource folder. And as we've already discussed, collaboration is key to fostering collaborative partnerships based on shared goals and mutual benefit. Work together to create inclusive solutions and address systemic barriers. And this is particularly where implementing a non-hierarchical and shared decision-making structure will be beneficial. Lastly, we are all always learning best practices, in part because they often change over time, which means that we will all make mistakes. And it's okay to make a mistake. The most important thing we can do is to take responsibility by addressing any instances of ableism or discrimination and being transparent about our efforts to create a more inclusive and equitable environment. And I will turn things over to Shun.
Thank you, Jessica, for introducing these important aspects of engaging disability communities. Now I'm excited to share our checklist for hybrid/Zoom meeting. This is more than a set of logistical reminders. It is an invitation to curate spaces where each participant can fully and comfortably contribute. We know that accessibility isn't a box to check after the agenda is set. It's an essential part of how we plan, communicate, and reflect. Whether we are making sure caption is accurate or offering multiple ways to interact, every detail signals that you belong here. This checklist distills this mindset into concrete steps, including before, during, and after a meeting, and so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. I'm going to skim over the major checkpoints so you can visualize using them. First, meeting information. Beyond logisticals, this is where you can create an access statement that invites requests for accommodations without extra emotional labor. The simple language reminds us to list what accommodations are already in place, such as microphones, captions, hearing aids or a prayer room, and then give people several low pressure ways to share their additional needs. Then the pre-meeting section, there are two highlights. First one, agenda and material, share information such as in formats such as Word, PDF, and the plain text several days in advance. Then accessibility needs and communication. Send an accessibility check email early and have your RSVP form collect accommodation request in advance. Early notice is critical as captioners and the ASL interpreters are often in high demand. Then technology setup and testing. This is where you check microphones, cameras, live transcriptions, and the presenter descriptions. 10 minutes or shorter tech rehearsal can save you a meeting scrambles. Then during the meeting, start with access check-ins like Jessica shows at the beginning of this workshop, and maybe community agreement. The simple, how is everyone doing? What do you need to participate fully today? Set a tone of care. Make sure interpreters are spotlighted, chats are monitored, and breaks are scheduled based on your agenda. Then post-meeting follow-up. This probably include sharing recordings, notes, and transcriptions in accessible format and provide an option for anonymous feedback. Then, most importantly, build in time to reflect on what worked and what didn't, so that the next meeting is even better. In short, this checklist is our collective effort to make events more accessible. It reminds us to slow down, to ask who might be excluded if we rush, and then to fix it before the meeting even begins. I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is break time. This is our built-in break time, so please feel free to pause and take a 10 minutes break and come back. I'm going to move on to the next slide. Text in this slide reads, Office is outreach email to the disability community. And on the right side of the screen is the same image of the queer and disability justice activist Annie Scrum. This activity has 4 steps. First, read the email, which will be showing in the next slide. Then, notice how it makes you feel and write down a 3-word reaction. The next step is spotting the trouble spots. Last, pick 1 or 2 lines to fix it. In the next section, we invite you to read, analyze, and share your thoughts about an email that was intended to engage the disability community, but failed in several ways. Okay. Now I've moved on to the next slide about the Office is outreach email. I'm going to make the screen bigger, and if you have trouble reading the screen, please follow the QR code on the slide 2 to access the full slide. In this activity, please think of me as a tour guide and a fellow travelers. I will walk you through each step, show you my own answers, and then invite you to add yours. Together, we will use this email to practice identifying barriers and rewriting for true inclusion. I encourage you to read the email and write down a 3-word reaction. Whatever popped into your head, no, don't need to overthink. Please free to pause here and read the email at your own pace.
And Shun, I might just read it out loud just as an access measure.
Yeah.
And then we'll pause. So the subject line reads Invitation, Resilience, and Grit Panel, limited seats. Hello, friends. Office A at University X is hosting a special evening panel, Resilience and Grit, Stories from the Differently Abled, on Thursday, May 1st at 6 p.m. in the historic Redwood building on campus. We would love a strong turnout from the disability community so we can learn from your perspective. All event details are in the attached PDF. It looks best on a laptop. Phone viewing isn't recommended. Please RSVP through the Google form link inside the PDF by this Sunday as we can finalize catering numbers. If you require any special arrangements, add a note in the last text box of the form and we'll try to accommodate. We will record the session and share highlights afterward for anyone who can't attend in person. We hope you'll join us for an inspiring night.
Okay, welcome back. I moved to the next slide about my reaction. For me, the very first words that bubbled up here were rushed, inaccessible, and condescending as I read the email. Here is why. First, rushed. It's at the beginning, the email says limited seats and ask participants to RSVP in less a week. And that feels hurried, inaccessible. All the information is in a PDF that looks better on a laptop that won't work for everyone, especially think about phone users or people using screen readers. The last point is, I feel, is condescending. The last sentence in the first paragraph says, we would love a strong turnout from the disability community so we can learn from your perspective. This feels like the hosts are positioning, the hosts themselves are positioned as the curious audience, while reducing the disability community to subjects being studied. Even though this is intended to be welcoming, it sounds like the host need a certain headcount of disabled people to make the event look diverse rather than valuing each person as an equal participant. And moving on to the next slide about picking a sentence to fix it. I pick the condescending sentence and will try to fix it. A small shift twist can shift the tone from come so we can learn from you to we have built this with you in mind and we would love to connect together. And I will, if it's me writing this sentence, I will say we have planted this panel in collaboration with disabled students and staff. And if that is not true, probably think from the beginning why this event is here. And then I will say And we hope you will join us to share ideas, ask questions, and build community together. These two sentences, they could express similar information, but it feels very different, doesn't it? As Jessica shared earlier, mutual respect is the key in every aspect of engaging the disability community. Now, feel free to pause again, look at the 3 words you wrote, and find out what are some trouble spots that bothered you, and then, lastly, pick 1 or 2 lines to fix it. Now I'm moving on to the next slide, where I will share 2 email templates Jessica drafted. Jessica is opening the folder. Okay. You can access this email template in the resource folder we gathered. And here, clear and welcoming outreach starts long before the event itself, and the right email can set the tone for true inclusion. Here, you will find 2 easy to adapt templates, one for an in-person meeting and one for a Zoom/online event. Each template already includes plain language details, proactive access information, and an invitation to collaborate on any additional needs. Feel free to copy and adapt, make them your own, so that every message you send says that you belong here and we have planned this for you. Now we will move to the last slide, and this will be our wrap up at the feedback section. Please scan the QR code on the right side of the screen and tell us how do you think this workshop. Your feedback is important to us to make this workshop better. And please spend a few minutes to do that. And thank you very much for joining us. Please expecting our next workshop soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.